that coach in Houston for now is very empowered by the owner. Excuse me. That's a very different situation. That's a very hands-on owner. That's an owner who has the temperature of his building to a much greater degree. He's paying that coach big boy money, and it's year 2. I mean, Philbin, we were into year 4. You had GMs fired along the way. You had sort of these helter-skelter, stop-and-start organizational changes. You have an owner who lives in New York who's never in the building, who at various points has various lieutenants in charge, to the point where on some days some people don't even know exactly who's in charge. You had a guy in Philbin who the fan base had long given up on, and who, frankly, the team had perpetually failed. I mean, whether through the issues in the locker room, the leadership void, falling apart late in season. So I don't think Bill O'Brien is there yet, but it's certainly not trending in a good direction. And if they have the kind of season it looks like they're on point to have, my suspicion is the first move that's made would be the front office.
Yeah. No.
Rick Smith's been there a long time. Bill O'Brien comes from that Belichick family tree where you're used to a paradigm where the coach is wearing a lot of hats, and there's no shortage of people in the league who have looked at this for a long time and said it's like Chip Kelly. If he wins right away, he'll win the power struggle. And if he loses right away, well, it won't be his fault. It's because all the players I inherited weren't any good. So, we got to change the way we get players.
Well, one thing player-wise that they have an issue with is the quarterback. The old cliche, you got 2, then you don't have 1. Ryan Mallett goes down with a minor injury, and he doesn't get his job back. Is this something that is going to plague this team for the entire season? Because we know who Brian Hoyer is, and Ryan Mallett hasn't established himself as anything greater than that either.
Well, what Ryan Mallett has shown to be, though, in a limited time, is a guy who oversleeps. Right, when he finds out he's not the starter anymore, then he oversleeps a practice, and he's pouty and he's petulant, and then he gets a chance to play because the coach has an overreaction, a knee-jerk reaction, not even 3 full quarters into the season, and puts him back in, and the kid has a good drive, and then for 3 straight games he does really nothing, to the point where the coach knows Hoyer's the better quarterback and he should go with Hoyer, but he just kicked Hoyer to the curb in the first game of the year. So he gives the out that, it's a short week, so we want to just go back to the guy who had been starting. And everybody knew Mallett's on a short hook, and even if Mallett doesn't get hurt, if that continued, another game with no explosion, 4 to 5 yards per attempt, a lot of dink and dunk stuff, no pace, no tempo, not a lot of overt signs of leadership, that he was going to yank the kid probably at halftime anyway. So, Bill O'Brien, the quarterbacks, they're both there because he knows them both, right? He had them both in New England. He's familiar with them. The reason that those are the 2 quarterbacks is Bill O'Brien, and the reason that he's got a ridiculous quarterback carousel going on is his own decisions. So, if people want to try to put that on the front office, I think they're insane. Bill O'Brien has created this monster. He's the same guy who passed on a lot of other quarterbacks and passed on quarterbacks in the draft, et cetera. So, that's on him, and he is certainly managing that position.
We're talking to Jason La Canfora, CBS Sports NFL insider. One of the big games here, because there's actually, let's be honest, there's a lot of bad games.
Yeah.
We could try to manufacture enthusiasm, but there's just a lot of dog teams playing each other or dog teams playing good teams that just don't seem very appealing on the surface. One game that challenges that is the Seattle and Cincy. I love Cincy this year. I think most people know that they're a better team than they have been, and they seem to be for real. The stuff with Graham, with Jimmy Graham in Seattle, everybody's piling on this kid, and, professional analysts are going really low in their commentary, almost like they're disrespectful. So it seems like the Jimmy Graham stuff is kind of getting out of hand early.
Well, I think it's also through the prism of the Percy Harvin thing, and the last time these guys went bold for an offensive weapon, it was a failure, and it didn't even last 2 seasons, So I think that's probably ramping up some of the rhetoric. But it is an issue in so much as, Darrell Bevell, their offensive coordinator, how are they going to calibrate being this team that wins with defense and wins with run game and, wants to have extra blockers in? Because let's face it, that offensive line is a failure right now. So, are they going to run a lot of 3 tight end sets? Because Jimmy Graham's not really a tight end. That's the reality, is he's not an inline blocker. Mm-hmm. You're not going to put Jimmy Graham at the end of your line and run behind him 5 times a game, much less 30 times a game. So, is he just a wide receiver? And if so, how much will they go out of what they normally do to scheme him into opportunities? Or do they just kind of keep doing what they're doing? And he's a luxury item who will make a couple of big plays a game and maybe makes one big catch in the red zone, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be like the offense flows through him in New Orleans to the point where you could pencil him in for 10-plus targets a game. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Now, if they're still winning, I don't think it matters a whole lot at the end of the day for anybody other than fantasy football players. But, they just need to win football games, and he's been a part of it a little more the last 2 weeks. But it's not going to look like that New Orleans offense. That's just not going to be what's happening. And the offensive line, their foundation is so rotted right now. The idea that Russell Wilson's going to go and throw, 8 times a game off a 5 or 7 step drop downfield to Jimmy Graham, well, how?
Yeah. No,
they do get chunk yardage is based off Russell's ability to keep a play going that should have been ended 3 seconds ago, and maybe that ball ends up in Jimmy Graham's hand, but it's not exactly schemed up that way.
Yeah, no, to put my cynic's hat on, there was a reason that he franchised or tried to get his franchise as a wide receiver and not as a tight end. Going to the Dallas Cowboys, Greg Hardy, I mean, we've said he's a bad dude on this show. We don't know him, but some of the comments that he's been, this is ridiculous. I'd be embarrassed if he was on my organization if you're the Dallas Cowboys. How do you deal with this going forward?
Well, the real problem is, though, after he says that, the owner comes out and is even more tone deaf than him and starts making comments about, how great Tom Brady's wife is. And, where does the leadership start? And we're so quick to jump on players. And what he did is absolutely disgusting and heinous. And frankly, I'd have been fine if they threw him out of the league forever. But that's not how it worked. And the suspension did get lessened to 4 games. But for the owner of that team to not come out and nip this in the bud or in any way put that sort of verbal behavior in check, for Garrett to have to do it 2 days later and for him to have to be the only adult in the room, that's a shame. That's unfortunate. That's not what this league should be.